In this video, we're going to move from individual codes toward broader patterns of meaning. The key idea is that we do not move directly from a list of codes to final themes. We first compare the codes, bringing together codes that have similar or related meanings and form temporary code groups. We can then compare those groups and consider whether several of them contribute to the broader candidate theme. So, the process can be understood as moving from individual codes to temporary groups of related codes and then to possible themes. Throughout this process, every decision must remain connected to the original data and the research question. Let's begin with the provided short example that contains initial codes. The research question is, how do mature students balance university study and paid work? The two extracts come from two participants who organized study around different patterns of paid work. Participant 1 worked evening shifts in a care home, where participant 2 worked in a warehouse at weekends. The highlighted phrases have already been given initial codes, so our task is not to create new codes at this point. Instead, we're going to examine how the existing codes related to one another. For participant 1, the codes include reading before work, being too tired to study after work, experiencing pressure to cover extra shifts, needing money and finding it difficult to refuse those shifts, and falling behind with seminar preparation. For participant 2, the codes include planning assignment time, university work being pushed back, and boss delay disrupting the study routine. Please note that each code remains connected to the relevant extract. This connection is important because when we later group or rename codes, we need to check that our interpretation still represents what the participant actually said. At this stage, the code may differ in their level of detail. Some describe an activity, such as reading before work, where others describe a difficulties or consequence, such as falling behind. That is acceptable during initial coding. The purpose of the next stage is to compare them across the dataset and begin organizing them more systematically. We will now transfer the codes and their corresponding extracts into a collate code table. To collate means to bring related code together in an organized way. Rather than continuing to read the data participant by participant, we start to compare codes across participants. This makes it easier to see when different participants describe a similar experience, even if they use different words. The table is therefore a useful analytic tool. It allows us to compare different codes' meanings and begin recognizing patterns. However, the first arrangement does not need to be perfect. The groups we create are temporary, and we can merge, rename, divide, or remove them as our understanding develops. Here is a template for the collect code table, which is available under the Assessment tab or the Week 2 tab on the VOE. The left-hand column is used for the codes and their temporary group labels. The remaining columns contain the relevant extracts from each participant. Keeping the codes and extracts next to each other makes the analytic process transparent. So we can see both interpretation and the data on which that interpretation is based. When you work with the full datasets, the table will be larger and may contain several extracts under the same code. The principle remains the same. Bring codes together, that appears to express a related meaning, while retaining enough context to understand each extract. The first arrangement contains five temporary groups. These groups were created by comparing what the codes mean and how they relate to the research question. Group A concerns managing study around work. It brings together reading before work and planning assignment time. The activities are not identical, but both involve deliberately arranging study around play employment. Group B concerns work and financial pressure. The manager's request for extra shifts creates pressure, while the need for money makes those shifts difficult to refuse. These codes are related because they describe why paid work can take priority even when the student knows that the study may be affected. Group C concerns disruption to study, falling behind with seminar preparation and university work being pushed to the end of the week. Both describe study being delayed because other demands intervene. Group D currently contains tiredness after work, and Group E contains travel disruption. A temporary group is allowed to contain only one code. We should not force unrelated codes together simply to make every group look substantial. A small group may later gain more codes, join another group, or move into a miscellaneous category. Most importantly, these groups are not themes. Their labels are temporary working descriptions that help us sort the code. A theme needs to express a broader pattern of shared meaning organized around a central idea. We do not yet have enough analytic development to make that claim. The group also do not need to remain separate. As we compare them more closely, we may realize that some code describe almost the same experience, some code are unclear, or one code does not fit the developing analysis. We will deal with each of those possibilities in turn. We will begin with the two codes in Group C. Falling behind with seminar preparation comes from participant 1, while university work get pushed back comes from participant 2. The wording differs, but both extracts describe study being delayed because the student has limited time and competing responsibilities. Keeping them as two separate codes may create an unnecessary distinction. We can therefore merge them under a clear code name study falling behind due to competing demands. Merging does not mean that we remove either extract. Both codes remain in the table, and the code continues to represent experiences from both participants. We are simplifying the coding structure while preserving the evidence. However, codes should be merged because their underlying meanings are sufficiently similar, not merely because they contain the same words or mention the same topic. If two extracts refers to work but express different experiences, such as financial pressures and physical tiredness, they may need to remain separate. The question to add is, do these codes capture the same meaningful features of the data in relation to the research question? After merging, we should read both extracts again. If the new code describes both accurately, the merge is reasonable. If it fits one extract but change or lose the meaning of the other, the codes should remain separate or be renamed differently. The next task is to improve code clarity. In Group A, planning assignment time mainly describe an activity. When we return to the extract, the participant says, I block out Monday and Tuesday evening for assignments. The following sentence explains why this planning matters. Without it, university work is pushed to the end of the week. Therefore, using structured planning to protect study time captures not only what the participant does, but also what that planning achieves. In Group D, too tired to study after work is understandable, but the extract is more specific. The participant is too tired to concentrate. Renaming the code as difficulty concentrating after paid work clarifies how paid work affects the participant's ability to study. A clear code is not simply longer or more academic. It identifies the relevant meanings more precisely while remaining grounded in the extract. We should avoid adding an interpretation that the participant's account cannot support. Also remember that renaming the code does not turn it into a theme. These revised labels or code names still refers to relatively specific features of the data. Their purpose is to make later comparisons easier and help us see how several codes may contribute to a broader pattern. We also need a way to manage codes that may be relevant but does not yet fit clearly with the developing groups. Bus delays disrupt routine can matter because travel disruption reduces the time available for study and makes the participant schedule more difficult to manage. However, it could also represent a more general commuting problem rather than a meaningful pattern about balancing paid work and university study. With only this extract, we do not yet have enough evidence to decide. Instead of forcing the code into another group or deleting it, we place it in a temporary miscellaneous group. This is a holding place, not a category for unimportant data. When we analyze additional participants, we may find more references to commuting, unreliable transport, or unpredictable schedules. If so, this code may contribute to a meaningful pattern. If no related evidence appears, it may remain outside the final themes. The miscellaneous group, therefore, help us remain open to the data without trying to make every code fit immediately. It should still be reviewed regularly, otherwise it can become a place where uncertain codes are forgotten rather than thoughtfully reconsidered. We now have a refined collated code table for this small example. Group A brings together the organization and protection of study time. Group B concerns work and financial pressure. Group C contains the merge code about study falling behind because of competing demands. Group D captures difficulties concentrating after paid work. The boss delay code remains in the temporary miscellaneous group because its place in the analysis is still uncertain. The word final here means that the table is ready for the next analytic stage. It does not mean that these decisions can never change. Qualitative analysis is iterative, so we may return to the extracts, revise a code, move it to another group, or reconsider a group after reviewing more data. The temporary group has now served their main purpose. They have helped us compare and refine the code. We can next ask whether several groups contribute to a broader shared meaning. The groups do not have to become themes individually. and they do not need to remain intact. Some groups may combine, some may dissolve, and some codes may move as the candidate themes develops. We will now transfer the revised codes into the candidate theme table. At the previous stage, we grouped individual codes according to relatively direct similarities. Now we want to look across those temporary groups and ask what broader patterns connect them. In other words, we begin grouping the groups. For example, organized study time and experienced study disruption may appear different at first. However, when we look across these groups, we may identify a broader pattern, such as students must actively create and protect study time because paid work can easily take priority. So, the aim is not simply to place a heading above several codes. A candidate theme should have a central organizing concept that explains what the codes collectively mean and how that pattern help answer the research question. The candidate theme template is also available under the Assessment tab and the Week 2 tab on VOE. The first column records the provisional theme name. The second column lists the codes that contribute to that theme. The definition column explains the central organizing concept, which is the shared meaning that holds those codes together. In practice, the definition often comes before the theme name because we first need to clarify the central organizing concept and then choose a concise name that captures that meaning clearly. The final column contains the supporting data extracts. These four columns allows us to check alignment. The extract should support the code should support the theme definitions, and the theme should contribute to answering the research question. If that chain is unclear, the candidate theme needs further revision. Two possible candidate themes have been developed from the temporary code groups. Candidate theme 1 is creating and protecting study time around paid work. It includes reading before work, using structured planning to protect study time, and study falling behind because of competing demands. This code brings together two sides of the same pattern. The first two, Code 1.1 and Code 2.1, show students actively creating space for study by reading before work and blocking out particular evenings. The third shows what can happen when competing demands take over, like study falls behind or is pushed to the end of the week. So the central organizing concept is not simply time management. It is the continuing need to create, protect, and recognize study time because paid work can easily reduce the time available for university tasks. Please note that this candidate theme combines codes from the earlier group A and C. This demonstrates why those groups were temporary. They help us organize the code, but they were not the final analytic structure. Candidate theme 2 is paid work limits study capacity. It brings together extra shifts creating pressure, needing money and finding it difficult to refuse shifts, and difficulties in concentrating after paid work. Again, the codes are not identical. One concerns the employer's requires, one concerns financial needs, and one concerns tiredness. What connects them is their combined effect on the student's capacity to study. Paid work does not only occupy time, it can also create financial pressure and leave the student with less energy and concentration. The thin definition makes that shared meaning explicitly. The bus delay code has not been forced into either candidate theme. It remains available for later review, but the current evidence is not strong enough to show that it belongs to either central organizing concept. At this stage, both themes are candidates, not final themes. We will need to review them against all the code extracts and then against the full dataset. We will ask whether the data within each theme form a coherent pattern, whether the two themes are sufficiently distinct, whether each theme has enough evidence, and whether together they provide a meaningful answer to the research question. The main process to remember is this. Begin with the codes, compare their meanings, place related codes into temporary working groups, refine the codes by merging or renaming where necessary, and then compare those groups to develop broader candidate themes. The temporary groups help us think, but the themes should automatically be organized around patterns of shared meaning that are grounded in the data and relevant to the research question.